My name is Olivia Bennett, and as I sit in the corner office on the 32nd floor, the entire city stretches beneath me like a living map. From here, even the traffic looks poetic, tiny dots of red and white sliding through the veins of downtown. The glass walls reflect my silhouette back at me, tailored navy blazer, silk blouse the color of champagne, and hair pinned into a style that looks more effortless than it felt to achieve this morning. My assistant had just set a fresh latte on my desk when the vibration of my phone broke the calm. One glance at the caller ID made my pulse skip. Daniel. My cousin. The same cousin who once walked into my life like a storm and walked out with something that was mine. My first office, my chance at building something on my own. I pressed the screen to mute the call, but my chest ached with the memory. Years ago, I had begged for a sliver of space in our family's company, only to be pushed out and humiliated when Daniel claimed it for himself. To the world, it was just an office, but to me, it had been everything, my dream, my identity, my proof that I belonged. Now the irony is almost cruel. He doesn't know that the building where he once strutted into, his office, doesn't even belong to him anymore. It belongs to me, not just the office, not just the floor, the tower. And as the phone kept buzzing against the mahogany surface of my desk, I knew I couldn't avoid him forever. The past had finally caught up, knocking at the glass walls of my present. I was 24 the day it all shattered. Fresh out of grad school, armed with ideas and an unstoppable fire, I thought I had finally earned my place in the family business. The Bennetts weren't just a family, they were a dynasty. My father and his brothers had built a respected real estate company, and Daniel, being the golden boy, was always handed the best opportunities. I was the quiet, ambitious cousin who believed hard work could earn me a seat at the table. I remember walking into the downtown office building with trembling excitement. I had been told there was space for me, a small office tucked on the 12th floor. I didn't care if it was small, or if the desk was scratched, or if the chair squeaked when you leaned back. It was mine. My first space. My chance. But when I opened the door, Daniel was already sitting behind the desk, his feet casually propped up. He smiled the way only he could, smug, condescending, like I was a child who had wandered into the wrong room. "Sorry, Liv," he said, twirling the keys between his fingers. "Uncle thought it made more sense for me to take this office. You'll figure something else out, I'm sure." The words hit harder than I expected. My throat tightened, my hands shook so badly I had to grip the frame of the door. I wanted to argue, to demand fairness, but every glance around the room reminded me of how powerless I was in that moment. My uncle stood behind Daniel, arms crossed, silently confirming what I already knew. I wasn't wanted there. I stumbled out before the tears could spill. I still remember the weight of my leather notebook clutched to my chest. It had been a gift from my grandmother before she passed. On the first page, in her delicate handwriting, she had written, "Darling Olivia, never let them tell you there's no room for you. Build your own if you must." That night, I sat on the fire escape of my tiny apartment, staring at the city lights, replaying Daniel's smirk over and over until the humiliation burned itself into something else, resolve. I decided right there that if there was no room for me at their table, I would build my own tower. And I meant that literally. Starting over wasn't glamorous. My apartment was so small I could stretch my arms and almost touch both walls of the living room. The heater rattled all winter, and the upstairs neighbor's footsteps were a constant soundtrack to my sleepless nights. But I had my grandmother's notebook, a cheap laptop, and the fire that humiliation had lit in me. I got my first job answering phones at a property management firm. It wasn't what I wanted, but I paid attention to everything: how contracts were written, how tenants negotiated, how properties appreciated. Every night, after hours, I stayed behind, tracing blueprints, studying spreadsheets, and teaching myself what no one in my family had ever bothered to show me. One evening, while I was poring over a file I wasn't even assigned, a voice startled me. "You've been here since morning, haven't you?" I looked up to see Margaret Lane, the firm's senior partner. She was sharp-eyed, with silver streaks in her black hair, and a reputation for being both ruthless and fair. "I just wanted to understand how this deal worked," I admitted nervously. Instead of scolding me, she smiled. That curiosity? That's what builds empires. From that day forward, Margaret became my quiet mentor. She didn't hand me opportunities, she showed me how to create them. She taught me how to read markets, how to pitch with confidence, how to turn rejection into fuel. Under her guidance, I began taking small steps. First by investing in a rundown duplex with the little savings I scraped together, then by flipping it after months of sweat and sleepless nights. The day I handed over the keys to the new buyers, my hands were blistered from painting, my bank account nearly empty, but I felt something I'd never felt before: freedom. It was mine. No uncle, no cousin, no one to steal it away. One deal turned into another. My nights blurred into mornings, fueled by black coffee and determination. I made mistakes, plenty of them, contracts I misunderstood, projects that cost more than they returned, but every stumble sharpened me. When my family asked how I was doing, I kept my answers vague. Oh, keeping busy. I posted nothing flashy online, no luxury bags, no designer heels. Just enough to seem ordinary. Meanwhile, I was quietly stacking bricks, building something far larger than they could imagine. Years passed and the projects grew bigger. Investors began to call me instead of the other way around. By 30, I had my own firm. By 32, I was signing papers that gave me controlling ownership of a downtown high-rise, the very tower that now carried my name on the deed. I didn't announce it. I didn't throw a party. I simply walked into that lobby, ran my fingers over the cool marble, and whispered to myself, "You built your own room, Olivia." And then some. What Daniel didn't know, what no one in my family knew, was that while they were busy dismissing me, I was building an empire. Quietly, patiently, on my own terms. It was a late Thursday afternoon when Daniel finally showed up at the tower. I knew it before he even stepped through the revolving doors. The faint click of his dress shoes on polished marble echoed like a memory I couldn't shake. My assistant gave me a knowing look as I rose from my desk, adjusting the silk scarf around my neck, and smoothed the navy blazer over my shoulders. "Mr. Bennett," I said, my voice calm, almost warm, as I extended my hand. "It's been a long time." Daniel blinked. His confident smirk faltered as his gaze swept across the office. He didn't just see a desk or an office. He saw the culmination of everything he had underestimated. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the skyline, catching the golden light of the late afternoon. Marble floors reflected expensive abstract art I had collected over the years, each piece with a story of a risk taken, a failure overcome. A wall of awards and framed contracts glimmered behind me, evidence that this was not a temporary position. This was my empire. "Olivia," his voice trailed off. He was searching for something to anchor him, some familiar ground. There wasn't any. I gestured toward the chairs across from my desk. "Sit. Let's talk." As he sank into the leather seat, I let the silence stretch for a moment, letting the weight of the office, of my accomplishments, sink in. You own this?" His tone was incredulous, bordering on disbelief. I nodded, letting the words hang in the air. "Not just this office. Not just this floor. The tower. Downtown Realty Partners. I have controlling ownership. The building, the land, the contracts, everything." Daniel's jaw tightened. His eyes flicked to the framed blueprint of the tower on the wall, then to the glass windows that overlooked the city he had once thought was his playground. I could see a flicker of guilt, shame, even envy, cross his features, the same expression I remembered when he had taken my office years ago. I thought," he began, but I interrupted, my voice steady. "Thought I would fail. Thought I wouldn't fight back. Thought I'd need your permission to exist in this world." I leaned back, letting the calm certainty of my posture speak louder than any words. "I don't," he swallowed, and I knew in that moment that he finally understood something he hadn't before. The Olivia he had once dismissed was gone. In her place was someone who had built her own empire, stronger, because she had fought for it alone. I let him absorb it, watched the color drain from his face as he realized the irony. The very tower he had walked into as if it were his by birthright was now mine, literally and symbolically. And for once, he had no power to take anything from me. The silence stretched, punctuated only by the soft hum of the air conditioning and the distant sounds of the city below. I could almost hear my grandmother's voice in my mind, whispering, "Build your own if you must." I had followed that advice. And now, Daniel was finally seeing the result. I leaned back in my chair, letting the afternoon light spill across the office. Daniel and my other family members sat across from me, unsure, uneasy. For once, the balance of power had shifted, and I was fully aware of it. "I'm going to be honest," I began, my voice calm but firm. "I can help you, but it won't be on the terms you expect. The old patterns of entitlement, shortcuts, and taking what isn't yours don't exist here anymore." Daniel's shoulders stiffened. My cousin had never been called out like this before, and I relished the small flicker of discomfort. "First," I continued, "if you want to be involved in my projects, you need to earn it honestly. No influence from the family name, no excuses. You will work, you will contribute, or you will step aside." I turned to my aunt and uncle, who had quietly watched this confrontation unfold. "And for the rest of you," I said, "this is an opportunity to grow, not to rely on me or anyone else. Toxic habits end here. Complaining without action, jealousy, gossip. If you want access to mentorship, resources, or investment from me, you'll pursue your goals with effort, accountability, and integrity. No more shortcuts, no more entitlement." Daniel's eyes flickered with disbelief, then something else, perhaps realization. He had spent years believing that the family name was enough. Now, the rules were different. "I'm not asking for blind obedience," I added, letting warmth seep into my words. "I care about your growth, about making sure that none of you repeats the mistakes that nearly broke me. But I won't allow old patterns to dictate my life or my tower ever again." The office was silent, except for the subtle hum of the air conditioning and the faint city noises below. For a moment, I allowed myself to feel satisfaction. Not vengeance, not cruelty, but the pure, unshakable satisfaction of being in control. "You will meet these conditions," I said, standing to walk slowly around my desk, letting my presence fill the space. "Or you will step aside. It's your choice. Growth, accountability, respect, these are the rules. No exceptions." Daniel finally nodded, slowly, the first hint of humility breaking through his defensiveness. My aunt and uncle exchanged glances, the first signs of realization crossing their faces. They had underestimated me, underestimated my strength. But now they were learning that power wasn't about taking, it was about building, sustaining, and demanding respect. I sat back down, letting the shift settle into the room. This was no longer the past where I trembled in an office too small for my dreams. This was my domain, my rules, my legacy. And they would have to meet me here, or not at all. Weeks passed, and the change began quietly. Daniel started showing up at my projects not to claim credit, but to actually contribute. He called me for advice, listened instead of arguing, and even volunteered to lead initiatives on his own. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress, the first signs of someone finally taking responsibility for their own path. My aunt enrolled in a night course she had always postponed, inspired by my insistence that growth required effort. My uncle, who had always relied on his family name, started mentoring young entrepreneurs, sharing lessons instead of gatekeeping opportunities. Slowly, the people who had once doubted me were proving they could change, and I realized how much of my old fear had transformed into hope. I often found myself staring out of the tower's glass walls, the city glittering below like 1,000 tiny victories. I would pick up my grandmother's fountain pen from the desk, worn, with her handwriting faded but still legible on the first page, and feel a rush of gratitude. Her words had been simple: "Build your own if you must." She had given me more than advice. She had given me the courage to trust myself, to rise above betrayal, to transform hurt into ambition. And now here I was, not just surviving, not just owning a single office, owning a tower, owning my story, owning every moment of struggle that had brought me here. I smiled, noticing a tiny chip in my nail polish, a small, human imperfection that reminded me I was still me, even as I ruled an empire. And in that moment, I realized something essential. Strength wasn't just about taking back what was yours. Strength was about creating something so immense, so undeniable, that no one could ever take it away. I turned to the skyline, inhaling the city's energy, and whispered to myself, I lost an office once, but now I own the tower. And nothing, not betrayal, not doubt, not anyone, can ever take that away from me. A quiet, powerful smile spread across my face. This was my life, my journey, my voice. Strong, graceful, and entirely my own.